So, speaking of which, I have loved the use of chat in my undergrad classes and in all the classes I teach. So feel free to use chat during this session. And just to prove that we can, I had a colleague who wrote to me over the weekend after the LA County Health Department came out with their new guidelines. And he basically was saying, well, there will come a time where, we'll be regathering on campus. And he was suggesting we do 100-person meditation somewhere on campus. And that kind of freaked me out, even the thought of doing a 100-person meditation on campus. But I did think of the Jan Steps and that hillside there. So it got me thinking about campus and that process of coming back. I am curious where you are. So I'm probably guessing some of you are on campus, others are not. So just to prove also we can use chat, maybe enter into the chat where you are today, roughly. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so we are in different places, and it is going to be an interesting process of returning to campus. I'm not going to rush a 100-person meditation on Jan Steps, but I'm open to it at some point. So let me begin, and I'll just give you an overview of what we will be doing around the basics of mindfulness for self-care and stress management. I like this photo. A former student gave me permission to use it now and then. It's taken in the Sierras, and I've had the good fortune to teach meditation on wilderness backpacking trips in the Sierras, and it is nice to be on those great slabs of granite and to meditate out there. But one reason for showing the slide is just to make it clear that what we're going to talk about today is something that we can do even if we're not on a mountaintop in the Sierras. And this was made quite poignant a few years ago by a story that probably you remember. You may have missed it for some reason, but in June of 2018, the soccer team got trapped in a cave, about 12 boys and their coach, who's the gentleman on the left in this photo. And they went spelunking after soccer practice, and the waters rose quickly, and they found themselves trapped in there. And this is a very different situation, from for me, it would be completely terrifying. I think that's why I use this slide. It's just, wow, that's terrifying. And a very different situation from the open space of a mountaintop. And the story is that this man had been a Buddhist monk for a while in Thailand, and that he taught the boys how to meditate during those days. And I'm eager to learn more. I don't know a lot about the story, but being it was Thailand, probably the essence of what he was teaching the boys is what I will be teaching today, because the roots of mindfulness in Western societies now, as it's becoming more mainstream, do derive from forms of Buddhism in Thailand, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and so forth. This slide also is poignant for me because my emotions over the last year have been, the new emotion that's been quite noticeable is claustrophobia, right? Just that sense of being isolated, teaching, working this way a lot. So we'll talk about these topics, and you will have my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me if you wish afterwards. We're already off schedule a little, but that's fine. We'll talk about how we practice mindfulness in meditation. Then we will do a meditation together. If you don't want to do the meditation, no one's going to make you do it. But you might as well, as long as you're here, you may as well give it a try if it's your first time. Review what we did, take some time for questions if there are any, then talk more specifically about the application of mindfulness practice to working with difficult states such as physical pain, stress, other difficult emotions. We'll talk about bringing more awareness into daily life, and then turn to cultivating positive emotions, which is a somewhat different topic from the basics of mindfulness. So I'll come back to the PowerPoint in a few minutes. Mindfulness is a capacity that we all have. It's not something that we have to try to figure out how to create. It's the capacity to be aware of what's happening in our experience, what we can see, hear, smell, taste, feel in our bodies, our thoughts, emotions, and so forth. So this is a capacity that we have. It's also a capacity that we can refine and develop. And here's where meditation is one of the really good ways that human beings have developed over centuries in many different contexts to refine and develop these capacities. And it's also here where the science gets a foothold, because the typical sort of study, whether we're interested in can mindfulness help with insomnia or blood pressure or pain management and so forth, the typical study is very simple, just some sort of survey or MRI or something like that, a 6 or 8 week class, and then the study, the survey, the MRI again, and so forth. And it is very interesting to me as someone who has meditated seriously for 30 years. I started when I was a philosophy grad student. And back in the old days, it would have been plausible to me that what was happening for me, what kept my interest, what engaged me, could be studied scientifically, but it also would seem quite plausible to me that it wouldn't be amenable to scientific investigation. And now, of course, it's routine for there to be an announcement of a study that has shown that people who practice mindfulness have benefits in mental and physical health, and even in brain structure and so forth. I am not a scientist. I'm still a philosopher. I'm not really the expert on the science, but insofar as you're interested in that, I can help connect you with people who can talk more coherently. I get in trouble real quick if I start talking too much about the science, partly because I'm a philosopher and we're prone to skepticism. What we do in a meditation, I like to break into 2 parts, and I'll review this after the meditation with a little PowerPoint. So don't try too hard to get the details, but it can help us just to take a couple minutes to think about what we do. And I like to break it into 2 parts. The first is we use our ability to direct our attention, and we do it in a remarkably simple way. We ask ourselves to focus on something happening in our experience that's relatively neutral, meaning not too pleasant or painful. And it turns out that there's quite a lot of our experience typically that fits the bill, right? And so if you just turn your attention right now to what you can hear in your environment, right, in whatever space you're in, there may be some things happening that you enjoy. There may be someone jackhammering next door in a way that's annoying, slightly annoying, or maybe really annoying. But probably for most of us, what's happening is relatively neutral, right? It's not that irritating, even if it's a little bit irritating, and so forth. So what we do to get going in most forms of meditation, not just mindfulness, and it's not true of all, There are dozens of types of meditation, but most begin one way or another with this mental activity of focusing attention on something happening in our experience. And with that orientation to something relatively neutral. And the idea is, insofar as we engage in this mental activity for a while, our minds naturally become calmer, more clear, more stable, more settled. This is a remarkable fact about us as human beings. And it is amenable to scientific investigation and so forth. But it's something that we also can see for ourselves, that simply taking some time and doing what we're going to do, I'll guide you when we do the meditation. We'll use ambient sounds, we'll start with them, then we'll bring our attention into our bodies and just notice sensations in our bodies. The sensations connected with the breath often are really good for our purposes because they're there, they're real, and yet they're not painful. If they are painful, then we wouldn't focus there, but we can focus somewhere else, such as our hands or our feet. And the idea is we can see for ourselves, it's not that we're trying to make ourselves calm. That doesn't help, right? That tension around, okay, I'm going to really be calm now. That doesn't help to kind of try to make it happen, even in those times when we realize it would be better if we were. This is something that we can practice and learn. And we don't have to wait till later, right? If you're new to meditation, I know some of you are experienced because I know you. But it's also, by the way, great for people who are experienced, I feel, to kind of get a kind of a review of the basics from time to time. This is remarkably doable. Sometimes people have the idea that in order to meditate properly, we have to make some big adjustment in our experience to get started. And that is a misconception. It's also one of my pet peeves, right? It's like, we don't have to clear our minds. We don't have to change anything. I do understand why people might kind of start a meditation session by saying, okay, clear your minds, because that can happen. It can happen naturally at times in meditation where, there aren't a lot of thoughts and there aren't a lot of emotions and we're kind of calm and it's beautiful and it's great and it changes, right? But we certainly don't have to try to start there. If you can, by some miracle, clear your mind just by sheer willpower, yeah, great, good for you. But most of us are not going to be able to do that. And so we don't have to. That's the good news. That's the point. And so we do our best, and it is doable, and it's something we can practice. So we'll do this in a couple minutes. That's the first part. The second is, indeed, try as we might to keep focused on the breath, our attention will drift. And at some point, we'll realize we're daydreaming, we're planning our afternoon, we're thinking about a random memory. One thought leads to another real quick, big basketball tournaments coming up. There's plenty to think about, right? Every day. It's St. Patrick's Day. We should celebrate in some way, right? Yeah. So when we notice that our attention has drifted, we include whatever is happening as part of the meditation. Just that recognition, thinking, planning, I'm worried. Often there will be a kind of mix of thoughts and emotions, right? So there will be the rumination of some sort. There also will be an emotion of anxiety, stress, fear, excitement, joy, sorrow, claustrophobia, whatever. And with mindfulness practice, we also include the emotion, but with an emphasis on what we can feel in our bodies. And often in the torso, in the chest, there are some sensations that are a component of the emotion. And for some of us, this can take some practice. But the idea is it's good to kind of expand what we're aware of in those moments, not just the thoughts, not just what we're worried about, but also the tangible, visceral, physical component of the emotion. But this is more of a permission than something we're supposed to do. And by that, I mean, I've been trying to stay with the breath. I've been doing it maybe for 22 seconds. And then a minute or two later, I realize, oh, I've just been thinking about basketball for a minute or two. How dumb of me. Okay, I'm going to say how dumb of me, but that's not an official part of the meditation. That's just how our minds work. One thought leads to another. So I would encourage you just to develop almost a sense of humor about the way our minds work. We're highly evolved as human beings. One of our special skills in the evolution of intelligence is the ability for our minds to wander, to move from one thing to another, to keep track of what we're supposed to be doing, right? Or what needs to be done or whatever. So it's not like we're a failure in meditation when our minds wander. It's a function of our intelligence. And so when we notice that we're daydreaming or planning, we just gently include it to some extent. Likewise with the emotion to some extent, but we don't have to micromanage, change, fix. We just are open to what it is and then reconnect back to the breath or wherever we were trying to focus. And so there is an activity to do. It's definitely doable. It's as straightforward. If you can see my video screen on your device, it's as easy as focusing your attention on my hand right now, right? And we're not going to use my hand for the meditation, but we actually could, right? This is how easy it is. And so when we notice that it's feeling complicated, and it can feel complicated, our minds can raise problems. Just notice thinking, notice planning, notice worry, and come back. So let's meditate together. We'll take about, shift the schedule. Let's take about 8 minutes for this meditation. And as I said before, feel free not to do it if for any reason you don't want to. You still can get a lot potentially out of this presentation, even if you don't want to do the meditation part. But why not try? So eyes can be open or closed. Most of us will find it easier with eyes closed, but either way is fine. You might take a few deeper breaths, slightly deeper in breath and out breath. This is just one way to begin. And letting your breath be normal. We'll come back to the breath in a minute or two. For now, just notice the sounds you can hear. So in the midst of everything else that may be happening for you, plenty of thoughts, maybe sensations in your body, maybe pain, just try to focus on the thoughts. We don't have to exclude everything else. It's interesting. We can make a priority of just, okay, what's happening in this part of my experience? And you might notice how easy this is. We don't have to censor any sounds. We don't have to make sure we're hearing everything. We don't have to keep track. It's almost a permission here also. Just, okay, for now, your only job is notice some sounds. We're not trying to get something out of the sounds or discover something new in the sounds. We might, but that's not it. It's a mental activity, this focusing attention, which has the good effects of increased calmness, clarity, stability, and so forth. And we don't have to try to make that happen. Where we make the effort is just to keep the attention fairly connected. And so it's more of a patience. Indeed, it's kind of the patience because we're asking ourselves to do something so simple. So opening to sounds is a fine way to meditate. It's something you can come back to whenever you wish to. It's also good to practice with our bodies. So when you wish, letting your attention settle into your body and just notice what you can feel generally in your body first. Head, shoulders, arms, hands, torso, legs, feet. So we're shifting our focus from the ambient sounds to what we can feel, the palpable sensations in our bodies. There might be a lot, there might not seem to be a lot. Vibration, pressure, softness. And as we feel into our bodies, it can be natural to notice the breath now, just a normal breath, not trying to breathe deeply or alter the breath. Just let the breath happen as it has been. And there tend to be some sensations. The abdomen and chest, slight rising, tensing with the in-breath, sort of falling, softening, dissolving with the out-breath. A flow of fine sensations at the opening of the nose as air comes in, as air leaves. So if you're feeling anything anywhere that kind of is connected with the breath taking place, that's good enough. And just see if you can let your attention rest there, knowing when the in-breath begins, when the out-breath begins, it's unfolding, dissolving, and so forth. So we'll do this for a few more minutes, and keeping in mind that there will probably be those times, even in 3 or 4 minutes, where you realize your attention has drifted, you're thinking, planning, and so forth. Just a gentle recognition, thinking, planning, maybe tune into an emotion if something is happening there. What does it feel like in your chest, in your torso? And reconnect with the breath again. So I'll be silent for a couple minutes, 3 minutes, and then ring a bell to end the meditation. So thank you. It's good to meditate with you. So let me just give a brief overview of what we just did in the meditation and of what I said earlier. I invited you to direct your attention to what we might call a neutral home base. The reason we do this is because these methods can work to develop more calmness, clarity of mind, concentration. And in the meditation, I invited you to open to the sounds you could hear, to sensations in your body, to the feel of the normal breath. And as you may have noticed, you could do it a little bit, but your attention got pulled away. Whatever it is that pulls us away, we include in the meditation, and then we redirect our attention back. There's no need to be in a rush. Both parts are important for mindfulness practice, as we'll see in a few minutes in the application to managing pain and difficult emotions. But there can be this sort of back and forth. And there also, it's not necessarily one or the other. We might be with the breath and still be sort of aware of an emotion or a flow of thoughts. And so we don't have to take this model too seriously. It's just a model for how to think about mindfulness practice. I love teaching this. After 30 some years, still sort of astonished by the simplicity of the basics of mindfulness. My opinion is that the more experience that we get with this type of meditation, the simpler it is, in part because we remember more quickly how simple it is. And it can take some time, and it definitely can take some practice. But it is something that can be important. And are there any questions about what I've talked about so far, about the basic instructions for the meditation, or maybe something that happened or didn't happen, or anything on your mind? Feel free to unmute yourself and speak, or simply write a question in the chat. We'll pause for a minute to see if anyone wants to ask anything at this point. By the way, I have grown to love teaching online. This is just filler, but it came to mind because just finishing an undergrad class with 114 students, and we practice silence in a new way. Partly because if someone's writing a question, it can take some time, right? It's different from raising a hand and kind of speaking the question, and there may not be any, and that's fine also. So I'll take a little bit of time later if there is a question that occurs to you. Let's talk about a couple of the applications. One of the more interesting applications of mindfulness meditation in the medical setting is in managing physical pain. And it turns out that this model is quite useful in explaining the basics of how this would work. And if you are living with chronic pain, then this may be something that can be helpful for you. It's good information for all of us. And the idea is that if, say, my right shoulder is in pain, then I would begin a meditation in just the way that we did, focusing somewhere else, right? Somewhere that's not in pain. And it might be sounds, it might be the breath. Maybe the breath is a little too close to the shoulder, so maybe not the breath, but probably the breath still would be okay, but maybe my hands or my feet. And so this is where I do feel confident that working with anyone, we can find somewhere that would be a good home base. Stay with that home base as much as you can, pain being what it is. tend to come to mind, right? It tends to intrude into consciousness. It plays a role for us as humans. It can play its role too much, right? It can give us this sense of urgency even when we know that it's not necessary at that point. It can be frustrating, of course. What we do in those moments where the pain has come to mind is simply include it in the meditation. That can be counterintuitive. By including it, all I mean is bring awareness. If it's my shoulder here, what is happening in this part of my body? What's going on there? This is counterintuitive because so much of our quite intelligent response to pain is, I don't want to be aware of it. I don't want to feel it. And so very gently, though, with this, we bring our awareness into that part of the body, just what's happening there, aching, twisting. We don't need to name it, but we just are aware of what it is. No obligation to stay there, maybe just for a few seconds and then come back to the breath. And so there can be this process that actually is well established by now as another way to help people manage pain. Basically, the same model works for thinking about how we work with difficult emotions like anxiety, fear, stress, loneliness, grief, hatred, and so forth. The whole range of human emotions that are normal and that can be difficult, where by difficult, we would mean simply, we would just as soon not have those emotions typically. And so with an emotion like anxiety, that same process of recognizing that it's there, not trying to outsmart it, right, or micromanage it, so much as just be aware, what is the reality right now? What is really going on for me? And this is where a meditation practice can be helpful because, you know, life moves fast. And whether we're interacting with children or other adults or whatever we're doing, we're often in a context where we have to manage our emotions by not fully recognizing what's going on. So we might get angry at a child, and this is a normal human thing, and yet we obviously don't want to show it. We want to be smart there, which can sort of mean not really fully noticing what's happening. There is value in giving ourselves a space where we don't have to manage our performance. And this is where meditation can be helpful. So in those moments of meditation where I do feel anger, I don't try to talk myself out of it, even when my motivation is to have less anger perhaps, or to manage it better. I just notice, what is the reality for me right now? And as with physical pain, no obligation to stay there. We gently come back to that neutral home base of the breath. So this is, these are methods that can be practiced and developed and refined. They also can be used immediately, right? It's quite interesting. And working with undergrads, I've seen this many, many times where it doesn't necessarily take a long time for them to realize, wait, this is a new way of relating to anxiety or fear or whatever, and so forth. So that is that's a mouthful. That's the core of, in my view, of why mindfulness is becoming mainstream quickly, right? It, you know, the practice of working with pain definitely has been studied and with solid results. The promise is not that it will make the pain go away, but the science assures us that we can have confidence that it can help us manage the pain better. Likewise, the promise is not that somehow meditation will make difficult emotions disappear. This is a very interesting area, right? There will, if you get interested in practicing this sort of thing, then you will definitely have the experience where it feels like the meditation made the anger greater, right? It was almost like pouring gas on it, on a fire. Well, yeah, it's like we're paying attention to something that's real in us. One pervasive emotion now is grief, just given what we've been through this past year. And it's a common human emotion at any point, but it's probably more intensified for many of us right now. And there can be a way in which grief is something that we easily set aside because we're busy and so forth. And if we pause, pay attention, what's actually happening, it can be, the assurance is, the promise here is not that suddenly the grief is going to disappear. It's actually much more interesting. It's like the grief can help us navigate with compassion because we're actually in tune with something that's real, not just for us, but for others. So it's a very simple overview of how mindfulness works. But at every turn, as you can see, there are very interesting tangents that we could go down. So any questions? There's one practical question. Thank you, Stella. If you're meditating on your own, what's the best way to end? We don't really have, that's personal, right? You may have your own little bells you could ring, or this gets into the area of, if you have a meditation practice, should you time it? If you do time it, how to end it. I'm not a big fan of timing our meditation, partly because we're different. And for some of us, just 5 minutes is a great way to start. But if we can do it in a routine, regular way, it can become a practice that's supportive, and it may certainly expand in time if we do it more. But we don't, this is personal, how to end it, how long to do it, and so forth. I'm very wary of setting up like a model. This is what you're supposed to do, even though at the same time, there's no doubt that the more we do this, as with any skill, the more we practice, the more it will become familiar and sort of second nature for us, and then available to us in daily life when we really need it. Other questions about anything so far? So there are ways of practicing mindfulness in the midst of daily life outside of meditation. And just kind of that basic information that, oh, there is value in tuning into my experience, even when it's difficult. That in itself can be a little bit transformative. We do have an acronym that this is a weird slide, isn't it, to be using to talk about daily life. The tensions of daily life that aren't so prominent right now. We have an acronym. It's also not the world's best acronym. I need to, the S stands for stop, and that's not supposed to be how acronyms work. Take a breath, observe what's happening, proceed. So the action here is just taking a break. It definitely has been fun with undergrads to talk about taking a break when the technology is glitchy, or when there's the inevitable 42 seconds of trying to get slides oriented and stuff. It's like that tension, that anxiety in those moments is like a perfect opportunity to practice stop. Just take a breath right now. Notice what's happening in me as I wait, that edge of anxiety. It can be very interesting to kind of incorporate mindfulness into daily life in this way. And then finally, there are ways of practicing meditation that complement mindfulness really well, where we cultivate positive emotions. And there's a whole family of them that go really well with the basics of mindfulness. And one of the probably one of the best to start with is kindness practice, which also is called loving kindness or appreciation meditation. And in this type of meditation, um, our home base is not the breath, not sounds, but we use thoughts and images. So we think of somebody in our life who it's easy to appreciate. And this can be a person or it can be a non-human animal. We're pretty playful with this. So by easy, we just mean someone where it's nice to think of them and it's not too complicated. So actually it may not be the most important people in our lives. We can practice with them in a similar way, but to get going, it might be easier to start with someone else. And this is where pets often can be useful, as long as they're easy to get along with. So the idea is we turn our attention to this person or animal, and we appreciate their goodness. So this is an enjoyable type of activity. All the same, our attention will wander, right? It'll drift away. Even though we're focusing on an enjoyable, more or less pleasant theme, nonetheless, our attention will drift away. And so it's important to realize and to be crystal clear. It's not a failure. It doesn't show that we don't really appreciate them. No, it shows our minds are active and move quickly and fast, and it's kind of amazing. And so we can practice with this person in mind. I would like to invite you to do an exercise with another person. So there's also, I skipped a few slides, but there also is a way of practicing mindfulness with other people, real living other people. So we'll come back to the kindness meditation at the end. But for the next few minutes, I would like to invite you to do an exercise with another person where I'll describe what we're going to do, then Mark will send us off into the breakout rooms. So beginning now, think of somebody in your life who fits that qualification. They're easy to like, they're easy to appreciate. Person or a non-human animal. If several are coming to mind, just choosing one for the exercise. If no one's coming to mind, it's okay, think again. It doesn't have to be a terribly important person. It might, if someone in that, for me, who comes to mind in that respect is the man who delivers the mail, typically, normally over here where I live in Venice. He's invariably pleasant. It's nice to see him. I don't even know his name, but it's nice to see him and say hello. So that would be good enough, right? And so the exercise we'll do is one person will just take 4 minutes for it. And so each person will have about 75 seconds to be the answerer. And the question that the other person will ask is, so what do you like about them? And so it'll just go like that. The one person will ask, so what do you like about them? The other person will say a word or a phrase in response, not a whole speech, just a word or a phrase. Then the first person says, thank you, and repeats the question. So what do you like about them? And so go about 75 seconds, then take a little break and then change roles. So Mark, would you mind role modeling with me on this?
Absolutely.
So you can just ask me that question and I'll remind you what to do. So everyone has a sense of what we're doing.
So what do you like about them?
He knows a lot about quantum mechanics.
Thank you. So what do you like about them?
He's invariably loyal.
Thank you. And so what do you like about them?
Great. Thank you, Mark. Cut. It's so interesting, even doing these, even role modeling, which I've done dozens of times, and doing it through Zoom, it's still like amazing to have someone's attention where my only job is to see what comes to mind when I think about this real person, this friend of mine, right? So that's the job. If you get sent into a breakout room and no one else is there, just come back, and Mark and I will try to find you someone else. And so take about 75 seconds, and we'll come back in about 3 or 4 minutes.
Right. It looks like we have some people dropping off. Is there anything you wanted to maybe quick announce before, in case we wanted to end on the relationship, or do you think it might be best to come back after we do it?
Yeah, let's definitely come back at the end, and we'll do a brief kindness practice.
Okay. I will do breakout rooms, and we will come back shortly. 1, 2.